In a single week, fortunes built over decades vanish. By November, the Dow Jones has fallen nearly 40%. Bank lines stretch down city blocks. Farmers watch crop prices collapse below the cost of harvesting. And yet, in the early days, officials insist the damage will be contained. The economy, they say, will recover smoothly. A soft landing. It's a phrase that sounds reassuring, controlled, technical, as if economic crises behave like aircraft, guided gently back to the runway by skilled hands. But history tells a different story. Again and again, leaders promise slowdowns without pain, inflation without recession, debt without consequence. And again, those promises fail. Not because policymakers are malicious, but because economic systems carry momentum. And once certain thresholds are crossed, outcomes become harder to manage, let alone reverse. This documentary explores a simple but uncomfortable question. Why do economic soft landings almost never happen in history? From the Great Depression to Japan's lost decades, from Britain's post-war stagnation to inflationary spirals across emerging markets, the pattern repeats. Attempts to gently slow overheated economies tend to end not in balance, but in overshoot, not in precision, but in instability. At first, the imbalances seem manageable. Growth slows slightly, prices rise modestly, debt expands quietly. Policymakers respond carefully, raising rates a little, cutting spending just enough, signaling confidence. And for a while, it appears to work. But here's where it gets interesting. Beneath the surface, structural forces are already moving. Incentives distort, debt burdens compound, expectations shift. Confidence, once cracked, doesn't return easily. The economy stops responding smoothly to policy inputs. This is not a modern phenomenon. The language may change, the tools may evolve, but the pattern remains remarkably consistent across centuries. In this episode, Economy Rewind traces that pattern. We'll examine why soft landings are so appealing politically and so rare historically. We'll explore how delayed responses turn manageable slowdowns into deep recessions. And we'll look at the human cost when economies fail to glide and instead stall. Most importantly, we'll connect past attempts at controlled outcomes to the modern world, without predictions, without panic, just patterns. Because understanding economic history isn't about forecasting the future. It's about recognizing when the runway is shorter than it appears. Chapter 1. Historical context. Why soft landings sound so reasonable. The idea of a soft landing emerges whenever economies grow too fast. It always begins the same way. A period of prosperity, strong employment, rising asset prices, easy credit. Optimism becomes embedded, not just among investors, but within governments and households alike. Growth feels normal. Stability feels permanent. This is stage 1 of the pattern, extended expansion. Consider the United States in the 1920s. After World War I, America emerges as the world's industrial powerhouse. Productivity surges, electrification spreads, consumer credit expands. By 1928, car ownership has tripled in less than a decade. Radios enter millions of homes. Stock prices rise steadily year after year. To many, it looks like a new economic era. Federal Reserve officials believe they have learned from past panics. Interest rates are adjusted carefully. Liquidity is provided when markets tighten. The assumption is simple. Modest interventions can smooth cycles without disrupting growth. That belief that economics can be gently guided is the intellectual foundation of the soft landing. But prosperity also creates blind spots. Rising asset prices encourage leverage. Households borrow to invest. Businesses expand on optimistic forecasts. Banks grow comfortable extending credit based on ever-rising collateral values. This leads to stage 2, fragility disguised as confidence. The economy appears strong precisely because risk is accumulating invisibly. By the late 1920s, margin loans allow investors to buy stocks with as little as 10% down. A small market correction now carries outsized consequences. The system has lost resilience, but few notice. This dynamic is not unique to the 1920s. Fast forward to post-war Britain. In the decades after 1945, the United Kingdom seeks to maintain full employment, rebuild industry, and preserve its global standing. Governments promise growth without inflation, stability without sacrifice. The pound remains a symbol of prestige. But maintaining that balance requires constant intervention. Controls multiply, borrowing increases, structural competitiveness declines.
Each slowdown is treated as temporary, each imbalance as correctable. This is stage 3, policy dependence. The economy no longer self-adjusts easily, it relies on continuous support. Here's the problem. Soft landings assume that policymakers can fine-tune complex systems in real time, but economies are not machines. They are networks of expectations, incentives, and feedback loops, many of which react slowly at first, then all at once. Raising interest rates today affects borrowing months later. Cutting spending alters employment gradually, then suddenly. By the time data confirms a problem, the momentum is already embedded. And so policymakers face a dilemma. Act aggressively and risk triggering a recession. Act cautiously and risk letting imbalances grow. History shows which option is usually chosen. Caution. This leads to stage 4, delayed adjustment. During Japan's asset bubble of the late 1980s, land prices in Tokyo become so inflated that the imperial palace is said to be worth more than all the real estate in California. The Bank of Japan hesitates to tighten too quickly. Growth must be preserved. Confidence must be protected. When tightening finally comes, it's too late. The bubble bursts. Debt remains. Growth disappears. What follows is not a soft landing, but decades of stagnation. The human impact is often overlooked. Workers delay retirement. Wages stagnate. Young generations enter economies with fewer opportunities than their parents. Savings earn nothing. Optimism fades, not suddenly, but quietly. This is the cost of mistiming. And timing is everything. The pattern reveals a paradox. The more leaders promise smooth outcomes, the harder abrupt adjustments become. Soft landings fail not because they are ill-intentioned, but because economic imbalances are nonlinear. Small policy errors compound. Confidence, once shaken, doesn't return on command. By the time danger becomes visible, options narrow. This chapter sets the stage. Because to understand why soft landings rarely happen, we must first understand why they seem so plausible, right up until the moment they don't. What happens next is where the pattern turns, where intentions collide with reality, where temporary measures become permanent and consequences accelerate.